Hi, I'm Jamie from ESL Teacher 365, and today we are going to be talking all about teaching business English. So before we begin, I would love to know where you are watching from today, if you're catching us live or if you're catching up on the replay. It's always interesting to see where people are tuning in from, so be sure to share that in the comments. Let's get started. First of all, we'll talk about what even is business English. How is that different from general English? How to teach it. So what are some of the strategies? What kind of lessons will you be teaching? Then why to teach it. And this is quite important. Why should you specialize in teaching business English over general English or other types of English? Then we will look at some trends for 2025 and go into a live Q&A at the end. If you haven't met me before, I'm Jamie, and I have been teaching since 2007 was the first time I taught abroad in Costa Rica, and kind of full-time since 2010. I'm currently teaching from Australia, 100% online now, but I have taught in 6 different countries abroad and in the US as well. I've taught both ESL and dance, and I also am a small business owner for ESL Teacher 365, which helps people get started teaching abroad or online. Let's begin with what even is business English. This is a branch of ESP, so that stands for English for Specific Purposes. So you have general English and then you have ESP. Other examples of ESP would be medical English. So it's a little bit more specialized. For business English, there is a focus on professional communication skills, and we'll get into how that's different from our regular ESL lessons a little later on. There's also a cultural component. You might be teaching your students about different gestures, customs when it comes to international business, nonverbal communication. It's not only important that they understand how to use English, but also some of the business etiquette, customs, and gestures. In terms of what you're teaching, there's a big focus on communicative activities such as role plays, discussions, presentations, and also formal writing. Obviously, in business contexts, it's usually going to be formal writing. They're not necessarily sending casual emails. They're writing things like reports. What about how to teach business English? First of all, I want to make it very clear that you do not need a background in business. I see people who think, oh, I can't teach business English because I have no idea about business. You are the English teacher. You're helping them with their language, with their communication. So it's not really important that you have a background in business. Is that helpful? Yes, of course. If you do have a background in business, that can help you get hired a little bit easier, but it's not required. You also don't need to be a veteran teacher. You don't have to have been teaching for 10 years, and you don't need a lot of experience. Anyone can teach business English. And the first time I taught business English, I was very much just assigned the class and thrown in and just had to kind of figure it out. So anyone can get started. So don't let that stop you if you're a newer teacher. There's a big focus on functional language. These are different phrases or expressions used for professional situations. So think about certain expressions or phrases that you might use in a presentation, negotiating, meetings, things like that. So for negotiation, it might be language like making requests, expressing opinions, compromising. So obviously, in terms of English, there are different verb tenses and word choice that we use when making a request, for example, or expressing an opinion. So you are giving your students that language, presenting them with that context, and giving them the opportunity to practice in role plays and discussions. You also might be teaching industry-specific vocabulary. For example, if you're teaching lawyers, if you're teaching people in the finance field, you're going to have different specific vocabulary. And this might be new to you. You might be learning along with your students, and that's okay. I've taught people who were teaching, who were working in business in other countries, and they needed help just with general negotiations. I've had work with lawyers. It really depends on who your clients are, who your students are. And you may find that you're working in just one industry, or maybe you're working at a language school, so you have many different industries and lots of different vocabulary. You'll also do different practical activities like we talked about before, role plays, case studies, simulations, discussions. In terms of cultural awareness, there's a big focus on different communication styles. So if your students know where they're going to be working, this can be very helpful. Maybe you're working with a group of learners at a business and they do business with the US, or maybe they do business with China, but it's all in English, for example. So you'll talk a little bit about communication styles and how that can vary from country to country. Also, nonverbal communication, what things are considered polite, what things are considered rude in those different cultures. And business etiquette, how to present yourself in a formal way versus informal language. So we do a lot of lessons of helping your students identify what is formal language, what is informal language, and what should they be using in which situations. There's also more of a focus on speaking and listening, not so much on reading and writing. Usually, it does depend on your learners. Maybe they do need to work on their formal writing, for example, but in general, it's about communication. So how can they express themselves, but also understand what is being said and how to interpret it? Another important part as the teacher is to give regular feedback for your students. How are you going to do this? How are you going to structure it? But you need to let them know how they're progressing, especially because in business English, often the business is paying. So they might want some sort of report on your students just to see how everything is going. And you also want to help your students and the business itself create and track goals. With adult learners, there's usually money involved, and so they want to see that their money is being well spent. And this just helps them track those goals, create those goals, and everyone is happy that way. In terms of logistics, so what does it even look like? How do I get started? What do I have to do? You may be teaching through an English language school. This would mean that you're hired by the school, and then they might have contracts with different businesses and be sending you out. Or you could have classes that are business English classes in that language school. So that's what I did. I worked at a language school here in Australia, and I just had a business English class and I did some business English one-on-ones. You can also do in-company classes. That means that you are traveling to the business. This could either be setting it up with the actual business or through a language school. There's also freelancing. This is what I did with one of my business English students in Spain. I actually went to his house and we worked on business English, and I was just a freelance tutor. And of course, these days you can also teach online. You might find that you are working one-on-one. So I've done some one-on-one business English teaching, small groups as well. I've done that too, or could be a large group. And think of it in terms of if you're working at a school or a business. So if you're working at a school, I would say usually people are at a very similar level, and depending on how big the school is, that kind of determines your class size. But if you're working at a business, they may just have a once a week class where you are with 20 or 30 employees and you're expected to teach them business English. So it will look very, very different depending on where you're teaching, what your contract is like. For group classes, if you are working at a business and you have quite a big group, you will find that your students have very different levels of English. And this is an extra challenge for you as a teacher. You need to differentiate the activities a little bit. You might have some people that are quite strong. You might have some weaker students. So pitching things in the middle and then differentiating the activities. The lessons may also be inconsistent depending on the workload of the students. So think of end of financial year. It's really, really busy for businesses at that time. So they might be cutting back on your English classes. Whereas if it's a time in the year where there's not as much work to do, they may increase your workload. So that's a little bit of a challenge for business English teachers. I would say this is more if you are doing freelancing or in-company classes. Usually if you're teaching through a language school, that's going to be a lot more consistent, or you'll have closed classes for a specific amount of weeks. But just think about that in terms of your income, saving extra money when you're having a lot of classes so that it can help get you through those leaner times when there's not as much work. In terms of materials, there are business English specific books. I have used some of these at language schools. You can also use authentic materials. I've done this with more of my one-on-one students. They would come to me and have an email that they were drafting, or a report they were drafting, a presentation they were working on, and we would work on it together. Or I could show them examples of things used by actual businesses. Also, you can get commercial use curriculum. These days, there are more companies that are offering ESL pre-made lessons, and a lot of them actually have business English lessons. So that's all nice and planned for you. You can get those as a subscription. And then, like I mentioned before, just if your students have specific needs at that time, oh, I have this presentation next week. Can you help me practice it, or can you help me edit it? You might find that you are doing things like that depending on what they need. In terms of online, some online companies work with adult students, and so they may have business English type questions, or the students may be wanting more business English rather than general English. But I would say that's usually not the case. It's usually just conversation. For marketplaces like Preply, 100% you can teach business English. You will want to kind of talk about that in your intro video. You will want to add that information in your profile as well, that you specifically focus on business English. For freelance online teaching, it's recommended to choose a specific type of business English learner to target. So is it lawyers? Is it negotiating English? Is it interview English? And get quite specific so that you can attract your ideal learner to your classes. For abroad, like we talked about before, you can teach at a language school, in company classes, or as a freelancer. You need to understand which type of visa that you'll need. A visa to work in a language school is going to look very different from a visa for a freelancer. For a freelancer, there are things like business visas, self-employed visas, freelancer visas. So first, you kind of need to decide how you want to teach, look at what's available in your top countries, and then dive in to see which visas you're eligible for and what all the requirements are. So why should we teach business English? First of all, you can earn more. So it is a lot more specialized, and you can target specific students to fit their exact needs. The business may be the one paying for classes, so you can charge a bit more than if you're just working with individual learners. And the type of learners often have a higher income. If you think of people that are doing general English versus business English, obviously business English learners are earning more typically, so they are willing to pay more. And then once you have results, once you're starting to get results, you can increase your prices, and do this by having statistics. How many companies have you worked with? How many students have you worked with? What kind of increase in sales did they have? So people like numbers, and it's really helpful to show potential students what your stats are. People love that. So if you're looking for a way to earn more as an ESL teacher, maybe you're teaching general English right now, concentrating in something specialized like business English will help you be able to earn more and charge more. In general, there's also just more opportunities. There's an additional way to teach abroad or online. I think that people think that when you teach abroad, you have to teach in a school, and that's not true. You could be teaching in company classes. You could be teaching as a freelancer. So this is just another way to open more doors to you. And also you could have more opportunities to travel. You might be working with bigger companies. These are all going to be great for your resume, especially if you are interested in business or finance or any of those kinds of fields. Having this kind of international work experience can be very helpful. Another kind of bonus of teaching business English is working with adults. Teaching kids isn't for everyone. Maybe you just don't have that much energy, or you're not wanting to use all the puppets and songs and things like that. That is 100% okay. So when you're teaching business English, you are guaranteed not to work with young children, and the students are usually college age and up. Also, if you don't like working with lower level students, you're pretty much guaranteed as well when teaching business English that it's going to be intermediate as kind of your lowest level and above. So B1 intermediate is usually the level that is for most business English classes as a minimum. And then you will also meet, of course, very advanced students of many different levels. Another thing that is a reason for why to teach business English is the high demand. If you Google, like, what is the demand for business English? Pretty much every article that you see has all these projections of in the next 10 or 20 years, business English absolutely booming and continuing to grow, having significant growth. So it is a sector that is highly, highly in demand. Let's look at some of the trends for 2025. So these trends were taken from a session that was offered by Bridge Education Group. It's called Business English and Corporate Language Trends in 2025. So you can find this video. It is on their blog if you want to go through the whole training, but I thought I would summarize it for you here today. But it's really helpful if you are interested in teaching business English. The first point is that English as a lingua franca is being used kind of to connect all of our different businesses. We're using English. And there's a big focus on communication over accuracy. It's not about getting everything perfect. It's more about being able to express yourself and talking to different people, understanding them when you're spoken to. And what I thought was really interesting is they brought up is that the majority of English being spoken right now in the world is actually between non-native speakers. So it's not like we're training our business English students to only speak with native speakers. You might have people in India doing business with people in China, but they're doing business in English. So I think that's important to focus on moving forward in 2025. It's no longer just foreign companies working with English-speaking companies in terms of business. It is all these different countries using English as their language of communication. There is, of course, a movement backed by AI towards more informal learning. This just means that the role of the teacher is changing. So it's more of a role of facilitating learning rather than instruction. So think of yourself more as a coach instead of just an instructor. And I think a lot of people are scared by AI. AI is going to take my job, all of that kind of thing. But it's more about you as the teacher knowing how to use AI to enhance your students' learning, to make it faster, to make it more effective, and a little bit more fun these days as well, rather than the typical boring lecture. Another change in 2025 in terms of business English is shorter instruction time and attention spans. So in the past, business English lessons could be 120-minute sessions. Now it's more common to have 45-minute sessions. That's obviously a very, very big difference. It just means things are getting shorter, people have less time, and we need to factor that into our lessons. This also means that you will need to use some different things outside of class. So there's a trend to use micro-learning and gamification for learning outside of class. This could be things like apps, games, having them listen to podcasts, watch videos. Because they're not getting as much instruction time in the classroom, it is necessary for them to do some work outside of class. Companies are also looking for lessons tailored to their industries. Before, you might have seen a lot of business English lessons that were pretty general presentations or how to negotiate, those kinds of things. And now they're really looking for teachers who can help them with their specific industry. Is it finance? Is it lawyers? What is the focus? And we talked about before kind of that industry-specific vocabulary. Also, there is an ongoing needs analysis that influences the curriculum. So needs analysis, basically you're talking either with your students, with the business, or with both to understand what kind of lessons they're looking for, what kind of help they need, what their goals are. And after you do that, you are choosing the curriculum or the materials based off of those things. But you're not just doing this once. You might be looking at this every quarter. You might look at this at the end of every 10 weeks of classes. So you are constantly changing your curriculum to fit the needs of your clientele. Also helping learners navigate different cultural communication styles. This is obviously if you have different non-native speakers working in English together, there's going to be different communication styles. And also exposing your students to a variety of native and non-native accents. Before it was just, okay, let's listen to business English conversations in Irish English, American English, British English, Australian English. Now it is, okay, we need to listen to how someone from Singapore would say this, how someone from China speaking in English would say this, so that they are able to better understand when they're listening. And another thing for you as a teacher is to use podcasts, YouTube videos to learn about issues in your clients' industries. Basically, you as a teacher, you need to stay informed on what these top issues are for your students. If you're working with finance, watch some videos on finance so you can understand the language, the jargon, everything that goes along with it, all the different concepts. So in a way, again, you're kind of learning with your students. So I'd say that's what differentiates business English from general English a little bit, is that you are also learning with them. You're not expected to know everything, but to be able to help them with some of these concepts and understanding in terms of the language. So if you found this helpful and you're interested in teaching abroad or online, I am offering teacher help calls right now. You can schedule a 30-minute call on Zoom with me. So if you would like some extra help, maybe you have questions about how to get started with business English or just teaching abroad or online in general, then you can go to eslteacher365.com/call. Okay, let's get into some live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments if you're watching live. And if you are catching up on the replay, you can also leave comments. I always respond to my comments. So just let me know what your questions are. I did have someone on my email list who submitted a question before because he wasn't sure if he could make it. So his question was, How to approach businesses and offer classes on site or online. So I think this is a really good question. So basically, imagine that you are, let's say you're already living abroad and maybe you're teaching general English and you want to start offering business English classes. So how do you even do that? First of all, if you're living abroad, you want to check that you can do this on the visa that you have. You might be teaching abroad through a specific school and it's tied to your visa and you're not allowed to work anywhere else. So first check if it's even possible. Let's say that it's possible. Maybe you're on a freelancer visa. So you will want to go to different businesses, obviously have your CV. You would want to have some sort of cover letter, kind of pitching yourself as a business English teacher. If you have any previous experience, definitely list that out. Again, like we talked about, use stats to help them, especially in business. Business people love all those numbers. But you are going to let them know, I'm a business English teacher. Are you looking for this for your employees? Maybe give them some examples. You could offer one-on-one classes. You could offer small group classes. And it might be just pitching yourself to many, many, many businesses. But just keep going until you get some offers. These days, you might be teaching classes on site, so at the business, or they may say, okay, we're interested in this, but we would like some Zoom classes or whatever online type of classes that they'd like. If you want to approach businesses for online classes and maybe you're only an online teacher, so say you want to work from home, can be the same kind of idea. So you are preparing your CV, your cover letter, and just contacting businesses and pitching yourself there, letting them know that you offer different online classes. So it's really just kind of getting yourself out there, networking, and pitching yourself to these businesses. Okay, we have some questions. All right. Cyrus, hi Cyrus, says, hello Jamie, any certified qualification I need to have in order to teach? So you will find that there are a few different TEFL companies that offer like business English mini courses or certifications. I don't think that it's a bad idea to get those. They're usually quite short. They're usually more affordable courses. I haven't personally tested out any business ones yet. I would love to do that in the future. And then of course I will let you know if they're good or not, but it's just something you can put on your resume and it will be more focused specifically to how to teach functional language, communication in terms of business. So it is helpful. If you don't want to do that, I would say just get like a business English textbook and look through it. See what kind of topics that they're using, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of grammar, and you can get a pretty good idea of what it's like to teach business English and what you should be teaching by looking at some of these textbooks. So when I started teaching business English, I didn't do any sort of certification course. My school just asked me to teach these classes, and you may find that that happens if you're working at a school. They just say, all right, we need a business English teacher. Oh, tag, you're it. And you just kind of have to find your own materials. But luckily online these days, there is a lot of help. So if you want to boost your CV a little bit, you can try one of the courses. And after the live, I will put some in the description box that you can check out, but it isn't 100% required. Okay. All right, Cheryl is sharing, I have a business English certification and recommend it. Awesome. It gives you a leg up when applying. It sets you apart. So Cheryl did a 60-hour course. So thanks for sharing that, Cheryl. That's awesome. Yeah, it's always probably a good idea to do extra courses and things, even just for you to give yourself some confidence. Okay. If you are a brand new teacher, first step will always be to get a TEFL certificate. So you'll want the basic TEFL first, one that's at least 120 hours, and then you can kind of add on from there. Okay. SS is asking, should I do business English course or IELTS? So a business English course is going to obviously focus on business English. IELTS is actually a certificate of your English level. So typically for non-native speakers, some companies, or if you're teaching abroad, sometimes the visa may require a certificate of your English level. And that I 100% recommend for any sort of non-native speaker. You'll want to take that so that you can prove your English level. So that way, when you're doing different interviews, you can say, this is my level. There's different courses depending on where you're teaching. There's IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge. Some of them are good for life, like Cambridge, and some of them expire every few years. So do take that into account as well. Okay. All right, another question, worth every kilometer traveled. Are there any platforms where these businesses are looking for business English teachers? So there are a few different, I guess, when you're teaching online, there are a few online companies that kind of focus a little bit more on business English. They might be very country specific. I've seen a few that are even like the website is in all Italian, for example, but they're looking for business English teachers. I believe Twinix is also adults, but a lot of them tend to want business English. And then if you are on a marketplace and you say that you offer business English in your profile, in your video, you'll get a lot of messages of people that are saying, hey, I'm looking for a business English teacher. So I'd say start with those marketplaces. The companies for online teaching usually don't pay well because they're going to be paying you kind of the same as they would for general English, even though you can charge a lot more for business English. So I would say kind of stay away from the companies, start with marketplaces or freelancing if you want to teach online. If you want to teach business English abroad, then it's usually looking into options like freelancer visas, business visas, self-employed visas, and then contacting schools kind of once you are there, or contacting the businesses themselves as well. So yes, it's a little bit challenging. Okay, let's see. Any other? SS asking about like the IELTS one. IELTS does expire. I don't remember if TOEFL does. I know that Cambridge is good for life. Okay, Gabby's asking, hi, thank you for the helpful information. Do I need to be bilingual in order to teach business English? Good question. I get that question a lot just for teaching abroad in general or teaching online in general. You do not have to be bilingual at all. So your job is to help them with their English skills. And some companies or some schools will actually have an English only policy where you're only allowed to teach and communicate and speak with your students in English. So it really doesn't matter if you know the other language. It can be helpful for you if you're living abroad to know that local language, just so it's more comfortable for your daily life. And of course, there are bilingual schools, but I would say in general, you are going to be only speaking in English. Also for business English, if you're teaching in a school, you might find that you have many different nationalities. So I taught classes here in Australia. I had students from Italy, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, Brazil. Obviously, there's no way that I knew all of those native languages. We all just spoke in English together. Okay. All right, let's see some more questions. So SS asked, do you know anything about Trinity Level 5 TESOL? Is it better than CELTA? So the Trinity Cert TESOL and CELTA are very similar. The main difference is that CELTA is offered more worldwide. There's more locations that you can take it, and Trinity just has fewer centers that are offering it. But those are two of the very top courses that you can take, especially if you want to teach adults. So I did my CELTA here in Australia, but if you want to teach kids at all, I wouldn't take those courses because they don't focus on teaching kids like at all. For my 11-week CELTA course, we spent one day talking about teaching kids. So if you're interested in teaching adults, those are really good courses. But if you want to teach kids, I wouldn't recommend them. Okay. Let's see, Cheryl has some more tips for us. I find that businesses want teaching experience, and you can't get experience without getting hired. Online platforms such as Preply are flooded with tutors, and you're competing with thousands. So yes, first, teaching experience. So yes, it depends a little bit on how you're teaching. If you're teaching online, if you're teaching abroad, sometimes there will be requirements for previous teaching experience. But not always. I've been in situations where, because I was kind of the only English teacher, I just got thrown into, okay, you're doing test prep classes, you're doing business English classes. They didn't really care how much experience I had. I was the teacher, I was there. So I'd say it depends a lot on your context or where you are. For online platforms like Preply, yes, they are flooded with teachers, 100%, but I wouldn't say that they are flooded with specialized teachers. So you have a lot of general English teachers, but you want to help yourself stand out. To give you an example, there is a teacher that I interviewed for my blog who teaches architecture English. And she's been able to really build up herself because she is so specialized. So if I'm on a marketplace, I'm an architect, I'm looking for a teacher, I'm probably going to choose the teacher that's teaching architecture English over general English or over business English for lawyers. So you want to niche down when you're on a platform like Preply to help yourself stand out. So choose something specific. Just like if you were teaching test prep, you wouldn't necessarily want to offer every single test. You would want to focus on one or two tests and really draw in those learners that are looking to improve their scores on those tests. So try to get as specific as you can, but of course, keep the market in mind. If there's not a huge market for the classes that you're offering, then you're going to struggle to get students. But it also comes down to your time zone, when you're available. There's a lot of different factors that go into marketplaces, but good comments. Thanks for sharing. Okay. T.S. Baker asks, need a recommendation. What one business English EFL book for teachers would you recommend? I used the books that were available at my school. So we have a lot of Cambridge books here in Australia. So I think I showed you one of them. They do have ones that are like specifically for vocabulary, specifically business English grammar, and then you'll have kind of general business English books. So I have only used the ones that were available. I've also used some of the online curriculums, taken a look at some of their business English lessons. I'd say I like the books a little bit better than some of the online curriculums like ESL Pals and ESL Brains, things like that offer business English. So I don't know which one to recommend to you because I've pretty much only used like the Cambridge brand, but those ones were good. So if anyone else has recommendations, you can leave them in the comments. Okay. Other questions. Brian asks, are there separate job boards for business English teaching positions? So if you go to international job boards like Dave's ESL Cafe or TEFL.com, TEFL.org, I believe they both have job boards as well. I wouldn't say that there's separate like areas for those, but in the listings, they may say that they're looking for business English teachers. So I can't think of like a job board that's specifically for business English, but it will definitely be in the ads if that's what they're looking for. And yeah, in terms of teaching abroad, again, if you're going through like a language school, you can look at their website and see if they offer business English classes before you apply. So that way you kind of know if that's an option for you. Okay. If you have any more questions, just leave them in the comments. Okay, SS is asking, what courses would you recommend for teaching kids? So if you are interested in teaching kids only or kids and adults, I mentioned before that CELTA and CERT TESOL aren't the best option. So I actually would encourage you to send me an email. I can help you out, give you kind of a personalized recommendation on what course is best for you. This is going to depend on your passport, if you have a degree or not, and where you want to teach, and of course your budget as well. So I do offer kind of recommendations. I test out a lot of different courses, so I can tell you what they're actually like. If you also prefer, you can do my survey. So you just go to eslteacher365.com/survey. Same thing, you'll kind of give me your basic details, and then I will email you back with some personalized links and tips. So that's probably the easiest way if you're looking for help with a course recommendation. Okay. All right, another question. In the Bridge TEFL mini course, does the mini credential expire? So TEFL courses in general don't expire. It's more the English teaching certifications that do. So those would be if you're a non-native speaker and you're certifying your English level, those tend to expire, but TEFL courses are usually good for life. I can't think of any that do expire. So I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure not. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you think of any other questions, just leave them down in the comments. And you can also send me an email. And if you have any ideas for other topics for videos that you'd like to see in the future, then just leave them down below. Thank you for joining and see you next time. Happy teaching.